99.5 The X. It just rocks.
And man, by the way, the album is really kicking ass.
Thank you.
I mean, the response to, we started spinning them when they first came out, but Cut the Cord and State of My Head.
Yeah.
I mean, those
Thank
songs,
you very much. Very much appreciate it.
The interesting is the diversity off of this album. I was curious to know if that is something that was, when you guys were putting this together and coming out with the new album, if that was what was the intent to mix things up, try a different route or sound, because there's some stuff that's a little different for Shinedown, what people come to know.
Yeah, what the elements were that we looked at specifically with Threat to Survival, it was our fifth studio album. One of the first things that we did was we decided that we weren't going to work with just one producer. We have a lot of friends in the industry and a lot of friends that we work with over the years that are engineers, producers, and songwriters and whatnot. So we wanted to work with the gentlemen and people that we just hadn't worked with before internally from a production side. So we worked with 4 different producers. That was one thing that we did differently. There were 8 different mixers involved in mixing the album. And the other side of that is just quite simply, and we get a lot of flack for it, because there's old school fans from the very beginning that can't necessarily transition with you. And that's totally fine, because that's your opinion and we respect that. But on a personal level and from an artistic point of view and just from being performers and songwriters, we can't make the same record twice. We just don't have it in our DNA. And I think if you look at all 5 records, they don't sound similar to each other really. And that's by design. I mean, honestly.
Well, no, that absolutely makes sense. I mean, you have to evolve and you have to grow. And if you're an artist or a creative, that's going to translate in your art and your expressions.
Right. A lot of times some people will have the idea that we're listening because we're so fortunate and we're very humble by this and very blessed. But we're a radio band, and we embrace that, because in the beginning, from the first record, Leave a Whisper, a lot of the media that we thought were going to be there for us just weren't there. They just didn't get the band. I'm not going to call anybody out, but the people that were there were radio, and they understood what we were doing, and they liked the music. And I've always said we only have one boss. It just happens to be everybody in the audience. Right. And the radio brings that to the people, and then they decide from there. So it's always been, for us specifically, we listen to the radio in our hometowns when we're off and things of that nature, but we're not dissecting charts when we're in a studio. We're actually writing what we're into at that time. Right. You know, because we actually record music that we actually listen to, you know, and think is clever and cool and catchy and heartfelt. We don't really, when we were younger, we cared what certain people thought. Now we respect your opinion, but we're going to continue to do what it is we do.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's you mentioned you had all those different producers on the album. 4, you said?
4,
and then 8 different mixers.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of hands in the mix. Does that get a little, I don't know, is that kind of
confusing?
A little bit, yeah.
The production side of the actual recording of the album, working with 4 individuals from a production side, was awesome for me personally, because I didn't microscope my guys like I normally will do on a record. I am literally like in there, like down to every note that's being played, down to every beat that's being thrusted, down to every note that's being sung. Right. And I am constantly reevaluating lyrics too while I'm in the studio, because we'll write a lot of songs. We don't ever like put a number on them, but we'll write anywhere between 40 and 60 songs on an album cycle. And then we'll look at them, and most of the time they will raise their hand which ones want to go on the record. It's usually pretty apparent, except for the first record, because we got our whole life to do our first record. You're building up to that. But every record since, it's been, you know, a handful of anywhere between 40 and 60 songs. But then looking at that from the approach of all of the different elements of working with 4 different producers, I wasn't on top of my guys in a studio all the time, because 2 guys would be in one studio with 1 cat, and I'd be with another producer at another studio, and then we crisscross each other because we did most of it in Los Angeles, except for Cut the Cord, which our very own Eric Bass produced, in Charleston, South Carolina, which was a blast. But it also did this. It allowed me to become a fan of the guys that I'm in a band with, because I got to go in and listen to what had been done before or the night before and just realize, like, these guys are awesome, and I'm very, very fortunate to be in a band with them because they don't need me to microscope, and they already take it seriously.
So a process that just might have done it out of necessity turned out to be very liberating.
Very much,
yeah. That's awesome, and it's to hear that and to see that the end result of that. I mean, this album it covers a gambit.
It's interesting. It's doing a very unique thing. The way that the transitioning of the music industry is right now, especially with streaming, because it's one of those elements where we're becoming, especially on Atlantic Records, because next year Shinedown will have been signed to Atlantic Records for 20 years. And that in itself is something that we take very seriously. And I dreamed about being on Atlantic Records since I was 10 years old. Once I heard Otis Redding, it was kind of like I started to figure out and find out who Ahmet Ertegun was. I owe that to my dad, by the way, because he's the one that introduced me to all of these just amazing soul singers that were all signed by Atlantic Records and Ahmet Ertegun. But, going into... I lost my train of thought. What was I talking about?
Which is the album and it covering the gambit.
Oh, the covering the gambit. Yeah, sorry. So my point of that is with the industry changing, with people that go out and that will download music, or people that will stream music and all of that, we're pro both sides of it, because we found out from our record company, Atlantic Records, like, we're probably the highest streamed artist from the rock format on Atlantic Records, which is a big deal, but it's wild, man, because like Threat to Survival as a streaming record has done almost 50 million streams since it's been released.
Wow.
And it does about 2.2 million streams a week now. And then with the it's a back and forth type of thing. Some artists are out there, and I understand where they're at, with download versus streaming, and is the artist getting paid? I'm kind of at a point now with it. The streaming allows someone to maybe not know who Shinedown is, but they go, you know what? I've streamed it. I like it. I'm gonna go see a show. There's always, give and take, and you have to look at it from that standpoint. The way that we see it is with the music and even with the live performances, as long as it's growing, then that's a plus, no matter what.
Yeah. Wow. It's interesting to have that and just to think and see and hear you talk about that part of the business. How much of it do you, and it's going to seem like not a question, but how much of it do you find important to, some artists just want to create their art and not really have anything distract them from that, where the knowledge and the understanding of the business side can be pretty daunting, especially this day and age.
I don't necessarily know. I understand where you're coming from. I don't know if it's necessarily daunting. It's, I'll give you an example. When the younger generation, because I'm 38 years old, but when the younger generation will come to me, like kids that are like 15 years old to 18, male and female, how do I get into the music industry? How do I get my stuff out there? They actually have an incredible tool with YouTube to be able to get out there and have a lot of people see them. We didn't have that necessarily, but I look at it like this, and I tell them this too. You have to practice. You have to play. If you're a songwriter, you're going to have to write 100 songs, and you hope that you wrote 10 really good ones, and you pray you wrote one phenomenal one, and then you start over again. You have to keep evolving, and you have to keep practicing. And if you're out hustling, doing shows, even if it's for 4 people, it doesn't matter. Like, eventually, you keep doing it, you will get an opportunity. And if you're in kind of not a dead end town, but if you're in a place where like music is not, they're not coming there, you're going to have to get out. Yeah. You're going to have to go to a bigger city. You're going to have to get in with a circle of people that are going towards that industry. And the music business, It's tough. It really is tough. But the best advice I ever got was from our manager, Bill McGaffey, who is still our manager to this day, and who is one of, if not the last true managers in rock and roll, because he has a soul. And that is, he said when he first met me, he said, keep your eyes and your ears open at all time and keep your mouth shut until you know exactly what the hell you're talking about. And, you know, and he always would look at me, and he still does to this day. He's like, Brent, it's about the music, man. At the end of the day, if the songs aren't good, the crowds won't show up.
It's a hell of a way to wrap it up here at Rebellion. You got one hell of a crowd out there showing up.
We're stoked. Yeah, we're happy to be here.
And I'll tell you, man, I don't need to take up any more of your time.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
I appreciate you. I can't think of a better way to have it end.
Thanks a lot, man. Thanks for everybody coming out and hanging out. We're stoked to be here.
Hell yeah. And we're glad you are, man. Thank you.
No problem.